You know, part of that passage that Margaret read for us earlier seems to ask this question. You know, Jesus, like many sages, seemed to kind of like it when people would come to him with questions. A lot of, Joseph Campbell says, most sages don't want to walk around just saying a bunch of stuff that they know. They don't know if you're ready to hear it or not. And it's not until they hear your question that they know what you're ready to hear, at what point in your own consciousness. This person comes to Jesus and asks the question, essentially, do you know, if I'm supposed to love my neighbor as myself, who's my neighbor? Now, we could ask that right now. You're sitting next to each other. Does that make you neighbors? Or is it just the people right on either side of you? Is it family, or can we discount family? They're not really neighbors. When you're really talking, you know, get down to business. God wants you to do this. We have a part of us, there's a lot of us at least, that have a part of us that want to know, give me exactly what the rule is. I want to know if there's wiggle room. And I also want to make sure I do it right. How many of you have that do it right thing in you? I really want to make sure I do this right. So it seems to me that the person who is coming to Jesus is kind of one of those people. He's wired in a little way. He's not willing to just kind of take this kind of love your neighbor as yourself thing. He's like, I want to know exactly. He probably alphabetizes his underwear, that kind of stuff. I imagine. You know, he's that kind of guy. So, the question also comes with something else in it, though. And I wonder if this might be something that you relate to. And me, I hear in this question another level. There's a certain sense of concern or worry. And maybe it's about making sure you're right. But maybe it's also a little bit about wanting to make sure that, you know, I'm not doing too much. These days, you know, there's a lot to care about. There are a lot of people to care about. And I do think that there's a certain sense in which many of us kind of want to kind of say the same thing. You know, haven't you asked that question? If God wants me to love my neighbor and live a life of love, if John Wesley is right when he says, do all the good you can, all the ways you can, to all the people you can, any way you can, every which way you can. Wasn't that a Clint Eastwood movie? Something like that. Long as you ever can. Sorry, John. Then, how do I do that? Because it seems like it's never ending. It seems like it's never enough. It seems like you just can't do it all. There's a part of us that is consumed, I think, with images in ways that our forebears were not. John Wesley could not have imagined that you and I would be able to turn on a TV and see images that we would then have, at least from a biological level, a sense of care and concern over, even though those neighbors are not in our presence. John Wesley and Jesus neither could imagine that we could watch movies and dramas on our iPhones over which we would have, at least biologically, the same responses in our engagement to those images that we have with the images on TV of people suffering who are in real life and having the same emotional dynamics in ourselves that we have with each other face to face. If you watch a movie, you watch a crime drama, you get the same biological response to those people, the caring experience, don't you? That you have often with people in your life. I mean, come on, haven't you cared about some character in a soap opera or some movie? It happens. We live awash in images about which we care. And it's no wonder that we're not dealing with a world right now that is full of not fired up, passionate givers, but burned out, compassion-fatigued caregivers. We want to care. But many of us have come to a place of apathy because we've cared and we've cared. And how much more can I care, really? Are you kidding me? Does it really make a difference? Haven't you felt that way sometimes? Next week, I'll be on vacation, and I will be off the grid. I'm going to be with my wife's family. We're going to be in a cabin where there is no phone, there's no pool, no pets, no internet. Not that either. And we'll be sitting, pondering life, staring into the woods, and I can't say I'm not ready for it. Aren't you ready for it? Want to come? Don't we all need that time to just be, unplugged? I'm going to come back on Monday a week, and Tuesday I'm going to be in here leading a compassion fatigue seminar for about 80 social workers who work with homeless people in the city. And I'm hoping by then I'll be over my own compassion fatigue enough to lead that. But this is a common experience. It's not just preachers and counselors and social workers who are struggling with some compassion fatigue. It's our whole culture. We've been overamped in the caring department, and we care about lots and lots of things. How is it that we find our way to a place where we get out of this apathy and return to that sense of caring and love that the gospel seems to want to call us to, the love your neighbor as yourself thing? Because this culture is sick with burnout. This culture is sick with apathy. And we are too. We're caught up in it, just like everybody else. They say in the 12-step thing, the first step is just to acknowledge your brokenness. And I acknowledge mine. I do. I have moments where I have a hard time wanting to care. Don't you? Martin Seligman, who is the father, I guess you could call him, of a new movement in the last 10 years in psychology. He's at the University of Pennsylvania. He's written a number of books, and his movement is called Positive Psychology. They've trained thousands and thousands of people around the world in a different way of thinking about psychology. It's looking at how most of our past experiences of how psychology tries to help us with issues like this have not been all that successful because they tend to deal and focus on how do we get over the stuff that is hard and painful and bad, and are not exactly as good at helping us find the positive, a sense of well-being, he calls it. The work that I do with affect script psychology also suggests that the things that you would do to not feel bad and to process your bad feelings in a way that help you get over them are not going to necessarily help you with good feelings and discovering how to live a life that feels better. Well-being is a different set of scripts, of ways of living, than just coping with bad. In fact, what Sylvan Tompkins, the progenitor and theorist behind affect script psychology, would say is most of the scripts that we have, even of trying to get rid of the bad feelings, only continue them in some way. They keep us focused on things like our distresses and the things that we're angry about and the things that keep us in shame and fear. And so how do we transform some of that? I believe Seligman may have it right. He suggests that we have to learn tools to begin to balance our lives towards the positive, towards well-being. One of the things that he says in his book, Flourish, is that out of all the research that they have done, and Seligman is a research psychologist, he bases everything he says on lots and lots and lots of clinical data. And he says, out of all the positive psychology research that they've done, giving people exercises to do, giving them different activities, and seeing how those activities create a better sense for them about a sense of well-being in their life. You know what the one activity that they have found by far is the greatest, most powerful way of creating well-being in a human being? The simple task of doing an act of kindness. A simple task of doing an act of kindness. Notice he didn't say thinking about doing a simple act of kindness. That won't get you there. I'll give you an example. He talks in his own experience of being standing in line at the post office, and he's fuming. He's there to buy a bunch of 1-cent stamps, a 1-cent postal increase. And he's fuming that he's having to stand in this long line at the post office to get some 1-cent stamps. He's just fuming. He finally gets to the desk, and he buys 50 sheets of 1-cent stamps. And he turns around to the crowd and he says, "Who needs 1-cent stamps? They're free." And he begins to hand out these stamps, and the line disappeared. And he said he remembers that moment as one of the greatest moments of well-being for him. When we think about love your neighbor as yourself, I want you to recognize how we have somehow gotten in our minds that caring for somebody is going to drain us. No, it's going to fill you. Now, sure, we have encounters with people. We have plenty of times where we encounter people where we have a desire that they are going to change. They're going to do something different than they're going to do. And when we get invested in that, yeah, we're going to get disappointed. We're going to get frustrated. We're going to feel ineffective sometimes. And that doesn't feel good. But a simple act of kindness can always feel good. Simply caring can always feel good. But there's another piece that Seligman finds is truly significant in this. And I believe it is probably one of the biggest keys that we have in managing our own experiences of burnout and compassion fatigue. Because what he says is they have found that, for the most part, what makes a huge difference in the capacity to live out of that caring is not how much you are capable of doing these acts of kindness for other people, but how much are you able to receive acts of kindness from others? How much are you able to let people in? You know that old song by the Eagles, Desperado? In the end it says, you got to let somebody love you. Let somebody love you before it's too late. I'm not going to sing it. I'm tempted. But you know that, if you know that song, just replay it in your mind for a moment. Come down from your fences. You've been out riding fences for so long now. You're a hard one, but I know you've got your reasons. Little piano. These things that are pleasing you can hurt you somehow. Think about that song just for a moment. We didn't plan this. This is great. It's been that kind of morning, hasn't it? It's great. How do you let people into your life? Really, what are the signals that you put out that keep people a little bit at distance? What would it mean to just let yourself be more vulnerable and open? More honest. It's risky. But, you know, many of us learned that it's a lot easier to stay guarded and get our relationships by caring for other people. I'll care for you, I'll care for you, I'll care for you. But I never let anybody in to care for me. Burnout is a result. When we let down the defenses just enough to let some love in, to let somebody else's grace in, then maybe that is a key for us to let ourselves recover that cup, to fill it up again. So I challenge you this week, maybe, just to try two things. Let somebody love you, and do one random, silly even, act of kindness.